Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. The Alberta government looks at new COVID-19 measures as the province now has more than 13,000 active cases of the virus. A wide range of groups presented their financial needs before Lethbridge City Council, asking for the city's continued support. And we hear how Jesus is being glorified through the youth of Lebanon since a devastating blast in Beirut last August killed 200 and left more than 300,000 people homeless.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney says our province needs to get the COVID-19 virus under control and has declared a state of public emergency. The Premier announced that there were 16 more deaths today, bringing the total number related to the coronavirus to 492 since March. The Premier says beginning Friday, new measures will take effect to hopefully help limit the spread of the virus. Those measures include no indoor social gatherings, and attendance at weddings and funerals will be limited to 10 people. Attendance will be capped at churches to 1/3 capacity, with everyone being masked. Kenney also said effective Friday, banquet halls and concert venues will be closed. As for retail businesses and services, they can remain open with 25% occupancy. Businesses like hair salons will be appointment only. Kenney says these measures will remain in place for the next 3 weeks. As for schools, our Premier says some students will be shifted to at-home learning.
On November 30, all students in grades 7 through 12 will end in-person schooling for the balance of 2020. And on December 18, all students will begin their winter breaks. In-person learning for all students will be delayed a week after the holiday until January the 11th to allow kids who have been around family, for example, and perhaps friends over the holidays to have that latency period before they go back to school.
Frontline doctors and epidemiologists called for a shutdown as daily caseloads have more than doubled since the first week of November. The province came out with its mid-year fiscal update and projects a deficit of $2.8 billion less than the last quarter. Government officials say this is despite the fact that the global health crisis and low oil prices have had a significant impact on our province's finances. Taxpayer-supported debt is expected to reach $97.4 billion by the end of the fiscal year. That is a reduction of more than $2 billion since the first quarter. Revenue forecast is $41.4 billion, which is almost $3 billion higher than the first quarter. That includes revenue from the federal government. Alberta's Nurses Union says the Provincial Health Authority has rejected a call for a settlement similar to the one reached with nurses in Saskatchewan. The United Nurses of Alberta says it asked Alberta Health Services to quickly negotiate a contract. The union says AHS negotiators wanted to delay bargaining, but the union rejected that because the agency refused to halt the elimination of nursing positions through attrition during the pandemic. Finance Minister Travis Taves said the union was seeking a 7% raise and that both sides have been negotiating a delay in bargaining until the end of March due to the increasing demands of COVID-19. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says other countries could receive the COVID-19 vaccines before Canada does. He says that's because they have their own vaccine production facilities where Canada does not. Trudeau says Canada has signed orders for millions of doses from several foreign pharmaceutical companies, and they'll begin arriving early next year.
I think everyone is rightly focused on vaccines because we know that without a vaccine, we don't get through this pandemic. And we are looking forward to being able to vaccinate Canadians in the coming months. We know that in order to know exactly which vaccines are going to be effective, we're going to have to watch the trials carefully. We're going to have to see the approvals process. We're going to have to set up logistical streams to be able to deliver those vaccines to Canadians. And those are all things that we're working on right now.
Canada's Chief Public Health Officer, Dr. Theresa Tam, says everyone needs to do more to slow the spread of COVID-19. Tam says the virus is now spreading rapidly in some places for the first time.
In many ways, we have more to bring to this round of the effort in terms of experience, tools, and knowledge. But things are different this time. There are more regions of the country with high infection rates, and it is clear that COVID-19 knows no bounds. Communities, jurisdictions, and whole regions that were little, if at all, impacted in the past are now seeing community spread. Some areas are experiencing very high rates of infection for the first time. Nunavut has implemented territory-wide restrictions. Some of the Atlantic provinces have seen an increase in cases, and the prairie provinces now have some of the highest infection rates in the country and are feeling a heavy strain on the healthcare system.
Lethbridge City Council began budget deliberations as the Finance Committee is preparing its 2021 to 2022 operating budget review. A wide range of groups came forward making their pitch to Council as to where their needs were. That included a request by Nikiyuko Japanese Garden for $171,190 to support the Society's operations. The Lethbridge Sport Council requested that the $55,000 new initiative funding be extended until December 31st of 2022. The Southern Alberta Art Gallery requested continuation of the increased operating funding by the city, and the Southern Alberta Ethnic Association requested continued funding to help maintain their operations. Lethbridge Council also unanimously approved a 10% pay cut for councillors and the mayor into 2021. Also no increase for 2022.
It's tough for everyone, and even though council's compensation is overall a really small piece of the city's budget, I mean like tiny, I think it sends a message to the community that if we're asking the corporation and our staff and our work units to make some sacrifice, then council needs to look at that sacrifice as well.
At the Finance Committee, Lethbridge Councillor Blaine Hagan asked Police Chief Shaheen Medizadeh if his department could handle a budget freeze for 2021 and 2022, to which Medizadeh agreed that his department could likely accommodate that. The Lethbridge Police Service and Lethbridge Police Association are joining forces for the first ever charity check stop. As Micah Quinn explains, a group of volunteers will be setting up shop at the NMAX Centre on November 28th to collect toy donations and non-perishable food items for nonprofits in our community.
The Charity Check Stop is a contactless event where community members can drive through the NMAX Centre parking lot to drop off toys for the Angel Tree Christmas campaign and food items for the Lethbridge Food Bank.
There's a little service road there where we'll be set up on the north side of the NMAX. They can pull into our lane, into our check stop lane, and we'll be there. They don't have to get out of their vehicles, so it's no contact at all. We can collect their belongings right from their vehicles, or they can hand them out the window, make a cash donation if they like, and then we'll have volunteers from Family Services, the Angel Tree program, as well as the food bank there, helping collect, and they'll be organizing the donations.
The Angel Tree Christmas campaign is in dire need of toy donations, and events like the Charity Check Stop are a great help.
I think it's fantastic. I think basically what it's going to be is it's a real positive experience for the community, which is something that we are all about at Angel Tree, is bringing in those positive experiences. So we're very grateful for Lethbridge Police Services to join in and host this fun event.
Timko says the campaign will be providing toys for over 2,600 kids this year and up to 4,000 kids with the Christmas Hope campaign.
We need so many things. Lego, any kind of building. We need dolls. Oh my goodness, the dolls are so short. We need dinosaurs. We need stuff for the teens. There almost isn't any gift that will be wrong, to be truthful.
For more information or to donate to the Angel Tree Christmas campaign, you can visit lfsfamily.ca. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
A note from the City of Lethbridge that the 3 yard waste sites will be closed for the season on Monday, November 30th. City officials say to date the sites have collected 1.48 million kilograms of yard waste that was diverted from the landfill. After the yard waste sites close, material can then be taken to the Waste and Recycling Centre or the landfill for composting between December 1st and March 31st. A massage therapist in Lethbridge has been found guilty of sexual assault. Cyprian Mudenge sat passively in court on Monday as the judge found him guilty of sexually assaulting a female client 2 years ago. During his trial, the accused, who is 55, testified that he never touched the woman inappropriately during a massage on November 28th of 2018. The 36-year-old woman, whose identity is being protected by a publication ban, testified that he got too close to certain regions of her body and she felt violated. Sentencing has been adjourned to a later date. Police in Rocky View County seized more than $145,000 worth of cocaine following a bust by Alert at a rural residence. Alert Calgary's organized crime and gang team conducted the search warrant and confiscated more than 1,400 grams of cocaine plus other drugs including methamphetamine. Cash and various rounds of ammunition were also seized. 40-year-old Jeffrey Bussey was arrested in Crossfield and faces a wide range of charges including drug possession and trafficking. A minister at a church near Steinbach, Manitoba, who spoke at an anti-mask rally has been given 2 tickets after holding a service on Sunday. The Church of God says Pastor Tobias Tisson was fined over $2,000. Mounties were called to the church around 8:35 a.m. on Sunday. RCMP officials say there were well over 100 people inside of the church at the time. Since Manitoba went into code red last week, 100 tickets worth $126,000 were issued to people violating the province's health orders. Manitoba reported 476 new cases of the virus today. There's been talk about a global economic reset, now not just here in Canada, but in many other countries around the world as we continue to deal with this pandemic. Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari says the socialism ideology has been growing in the minds of many young people, and that can be a dangerous trend.
You know, everybody works hard because there's so much opportunity, and the message to our young people should be you work hard to get to those opportunities, not that they should be given to you. So you know, it's the fishermen and the fish, and they're just asking these young people to demand fish.
Catch the full interview with Lisa Daftari, who will also discuss how state-sponsored hackers from China and North Korea are attempting to steal coronavirus vaccine information. That's coming up later in our program. Drug maker AstraZeneca says that late-stage trials show its COVID-19 vaccine is highly effective. Experts say this will further the prospects of an affordable in-store product that may become the vaccine choice for many in the developing world.
We have a vaccine for the world because we've got a vaccine which is highly effective, and because the vaccine can be stored at fridge temperatures, it can be distributed around the world using the normal immunization distribution system. And so our goal is to make sure that we could have a vaccine that was accessible everywhere. I think we've actually managed to do that.
Charities across North America have raised millions of dollars to support so many families impacted by the blast in Beirut, Lebanon. Volunteers have been working tirelessly as well, delivering medicine and personal protective equipment to so many who were affected by the blast last August, which claimed 200 lives and cost more than $15 billion in damage. The explosion also left around 300,000 people homeless.
They wanted all that pain to basically get out and give something positive. They wanted to turn all that negative energy into something that will give them some satisfaction that they're able to reach Lebanon somehow.
Even if you are not Lebanese, just being an Arab American, I myself am not Lebanese, of Lebanese background, but it's just, you know, I felt the connection in a big way to what happened and the need to help.
The blast in Beirut, Lebanon has impacted so many, including the children in Lebanon. Sat7 Kids Youth presenter Marcus Kashua explains how so many young people in Lebanon have been dealing with the tragedy that rocketed his country last August.
Hi, I'm Marcus, and I'm a presenter in Sat7 Kids. Just like anyone else, questions come into my mind, and different feelings of emotions, fear, worry, and doubt come to my mind, just like everyone else that experienced this in Lebanon. Our hope now is only in God. He holds us in His hands, and He controls the situation. He knows what's going to happen tomorrow. Just like in 1 Peter 5:10 it says that the God of all grace has called us to His eternal glory in Christ. After we have suffered for a little while, He will restore us and make us strong, firm, and steadfast. God is our hope, and He will restore us. When I asked my friends about the experience they had with the explosion, most of them said that it was so scary, but thank God they're okay. We all have this hope established in our hearts that amidst all these problems, we're still okay and we're still going to pass through these challenges. A group of teens in our church, we took the initiative to go down and help clean out the debris, help clean out different apartments, and give out food. We gave out sandwiches, we gave out water to those in need and those affected by the explosion.
That is so nice to see. Here is a hero in action. A man rescued his pet dog after it was attacked by an alligator in Florida. The 74-year-old man, Richard Wilbanks, went into the pond, grabbed the alligator, and pulled the puppy from its jaws as wildlife cameras recorded the entire incident. And you know, the coolest part of the rescue was that Richard never lost his cigar, even when he went underwater. It's pretty incredible. A great time to enjoy the great outdoors with the milder temperatures we've seen lately. In fact, we may even see double-digit temperatures later this week. Full weather details are coming right up. It was so nice to see us hitting seasonal values once again today. In fact, we could see double-digit temperatures later this week. Jeanette Rocher is here now with a full look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, perhaps I should put the shovel away, maybe bring out the sunscreen?
Yeah, maybe not a bad idea, Hal, because you're right. We're going to be hitting those double-digit temperatures later on this week and into the weekend with lots of sunshine and even some UV rays that are a little bit on the lower side. Not too bad for this time of year, absolutely. Tonight we can see partly cloudy skies clearing after midnight with those 60-kilometer-per-hour wind gusts. So of course with the nicer weather we are going to be getting those Chinook winds all week. Overnight low tonight -2 into tomorrow. 2 degrees, could see a 50k wind tomorrow with a partly cloudy skies, and then we're going to see the sunshine for several days in a row starting on Thursday, high of 7. So sunny and windy for Thursday, sunny and windy for Friday with a high of 10 degrees as we see that double digit there. 8 degrees for Saturday with wind and sunshine. Are we seeing a trend developing here? 11 degrees for Sunday and 12 for next Monday under sunny skies as well. You know, I'll take it. I don't care about that wind. I'll take that sunshine and those nice temperatures for sure. Average high for this time of year, 2 degrees, so we're well above that. -9 is the average low. 17 was our high temperature in 1939, and -28 was our chilliest day on record in 1996. Sun rose this morning at 7:58 a.m. and our sunset this afternoon, 4:39 p.m. It's kind of a bummer to have to say an afternoon sunset, but you know what? That's what it is. Lots of precipitation happening on the west coast tomorrow. Victoria could see some showers, high of 8, high of 7 in Vancouver. They could see 2 to 4 millimeters of rain there. Edmonton could see an overnight snowfall of 2 to 4 centimeters overnight. That snow is going to last into tomorrow morning and then stop. It's going to clear up tomorrow. Calgary could see a 30% chance of flurries tomorrow afternoon as well. Flurries also expected tomorrow in Saskatoon with a high of -1. 3 degrees the high for Regina with sunny skies. Mix of sun and cloud expected tomorrow in Winnipeg with a high of 1 degree. And then as we look further east into central Canada, for this region here, Toronto could see some showers happening tomorrow. And then Ottawa, a mix of snow with freezing drizzle. They could see up to 5 centimeters of snowfall. 5 centimeters as well expected in Montreal tomorrow with a high of 2 degrees. As we look further east into Atlantic Canada, Fredericton could see snowfall amounts of 2 to 4 centimeters as well. -2 is the high there. 2 degrees in Halifax with a mix of sun and clouds. Charlottetown, high of 0. And up here in St. John's, Newfoundland, -4 with lots of wind. They could see 60-kilometer-per-hour wind gusts there. So there you have it. There's your forecast.
A group representing more than 100 airports in Canada says federal funding is urgently needed to offset a plunge in revenue due to the pandemic. The Canadian Airports Council is asking for interest-free loans or direct operational support for airports impacted by the COVID-19 travel restrictions. The council is also urging the government to implement a COVID-19 testing program at airports to reduce or eliminate quarantine restrictions. It says most of Canada's airports rely on revenue generated from passenger air travel, which was down 85.5% last month from a year ago. Europe's aviation regulator is a step closer to letting the Boeing 737 MAX fly again. The EU Aviation Safety Agency published a proposed airworthiness directive, signaling its intent to allow the aircraft to resume flying within weeks. The publication opens a 28-day public consultation period, after which the agency will review the input and then approve the aircraft for flight. American regulators cleared the 737 to fly in U.S. airspace last week. Best Buy announced third quarter results that blew through analysts' expectations. The largest consumer electronics retailer in the United States saw surging demand for items like home theaters and appliances during the pandemic. The Minnesota-based retailer says third quarter profits rose 33%, while sales were up 21%. Sales at stores open at least a year rose 23%, while domestic online sales rose 174%. When it comes to making money and being successful in Canada, a new tax is the last thing we need. That's according to a former chief economic analyst with Stats Canada. Philip Cross says politicians on Parliament Hill who've been pushing for a wealth tax would be counterproductive and discourage Canadians from becoming successful.
A wealth tax actually penalizes the very behavior that we know is best for an economy in the long term, which is saving and investment. And it rewards people who engage in frivolous consumption. So we really get all our economic incentives backwards with a wealth tax. So I think in the simplest terms, that's why it isn't good for economic growth in the long term.
Catch the full interview with former Chief Economic Analyst Philip Cross and Jeanette Rocher coming up after Business News. U.S. President Donald Trump made a surprise appearance in the White House briefing room to congratulate his administration on a historic stock market rally. The Dow traded above 30,000 points today.
I'm very thrilled with what's happened on the vaccine front. That's been absolutely incredible. It's nothing like that has ever happened medically, and I think people are acknowledging that, and it's having a big effect. But the stock market's just broken 30,000. Never been broken, that number. That's a sacred number, 30,000. Nobody thought they'd ever see it. That's the 9th time since the beginning of 2020, and it's the 48th time that we've broken records during the Trump administration. And I just want to congratulate all the people within the administration that worked so hard.
Now, here's a look at those markets. The TSX was up 179 points on the day to finish at 17,274. The Dow was up 454 points to 30,046. The S&P 500 was up 57 points to 3635, and the Nasdaq was up 156 points to 12,036. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up $1.74 to $44.80 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 5 cents to $2.76 US. Gold was even on the day at $18.0760 US an ounce, and silver was also even at $23.27 US an ounce. Wheat is at $269 per metric ton, barley's at $271, canola's at $578, and corn is at $288 per metric ton. Live cattle were up $1.18 to $111.18, feeder cattle were up 78 cents to $138.60, and lean hogs were up 35 cents to $65.30. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 76.96 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Alberta Nurses Union says the Provincial Health Authority has rejected a call for a settlement similar to the one reached with the nurses in Saskatchewan. The United Nurses of Alberta says it asked Alberta Health Services to quickly negotiate a contract. The union says AHS negotiators wanted to delay bargaining, but the union rejected that because the agency refused to halt the elimination of nursing positions through attrition during the pandemic. Finance Minister Travis Taves said the union was seeking a 7% raise and that both sides have been negotiating a delay in bargaining until the end of March due to the increasing demands of COVID-19. Iran has unveiled a new ship that is loaded with many weapons, including multiple launch rocket systems. Is it a concern for us here in North America? I'll discuss the details next with our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari. But first, here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. The Lethbridge Police Charity Check Stop is taking place on Saturday, November 28th in the NMAX Center parking lot, beginning at 11 a.m. They're collecting new unwrapped toy donations for the Lethbridge Family Services Angel Tree, along with non-perishable food items for the Lethbridge Food Bank. Come out and help make someone's Christmas extra special this year. For details, visit lethbridgepolice.ca. The Lethbridge Senior Citizens Organization is looking for volunteers to take part in their Drive Happiness program. This program is to help seniors in our community who are facing extreme loneliness due to lack of accessible transportation. Volunteers will drive clients to their medical appointments, pick up groceries, and take them to important life activities. If you're interested in this opportunity and for more information, call 403-332-4320 or email volunteer@volunteerlethbridge.com. Experience the magic at the Winter Light Festival at Nikayuko Japanese Garden, beginning December 3rd from 7 to 9:30 p.m. Bundle up and enjoy the massive light display, ice sculptures, and other surprises throughout the garden. COVID-19 restrictions will be observed with one-way pathways along with other safety measures. Tickets must be purchased in advance. Visit nikayuko.com or call 403-328-3511 to purchase yours today. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
The support for socialism is growing across North America, and not just with young people like millennials, but also with celebrities and wealthy liberals. To discuss this in more detail is our regular correspondent, Lisa Daftari, joining me once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, there appears to be support for socialism with some of the left-wing parties here in Canada, and it's growing in the States as well, but many see that as a very dangerous trend. Why do you think that is?
Super dangerous because it's growing among young people. It's become like a popular culture trend, but yet most people don't even know what it really means. I'll give you the best analogy to all of this. My very young niece is about 10 years old, and she and the family is a bit more of the bleeding heart. And her mother sat her down where they're playing Monopoly with the family, and she said, "This is how socialism would work. You have to give me half of the money you have, and you have to give me 3 of those houses that you put down on that property because I just don't have any houses." And all of a sudden she's like, "That's not fair." Well, she's only 10, but I think a lot of these college students and celebrities even are very hypocritical or don't know what it really means because no one is willing to give their hard-earned money away, privileges away. This is America. It's where, the American dream was coined, meaning everybody works hard because there's so much opportunity, and the message to our young people should be you work hard to get to those opportunities, not that they should be given to you. So it's the fishermen and the fish, and they're just asking these young people to demand fish. What was very telling was at the DNC this year, Bernie Sanders came on and said, when I used to talk about these topics, meaning socialism, people used to think I'm crazy. And now you see bits and pieces of it really making its way into the Democrat Party. And that couldn't be any truer. Someone like a Joe Biden is pretty. I want to use the word moderate, but I'm afraid to do so. Moderate meaning now he's moderate in the scheme or in the landscape of Democrats who have become extremely liberal, extremely left, extremely socialist. So, I think that it's time for young people to be told the truth, for them to learn the definitions of socialism and liberalism and really decide for themselves what they want for their futures.
Now, you mentioned Biden earlier. I'm just looking at a recent tweet here from Malik Obama, who's the half-brother to ex-President Barack Obama. He's saying that if Biden does become the president-elect, becomes president, ISIS will return. Should we really be concerned?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's an interesting tweet coming from the half brother of President Obama, who was, obviously Biden and Obama ran together. But, let's put that tweet aside for a moment. We are in trouble with regards to our foreign policy. Look, President Trump was not afraid. He was not an appeaser. He was not there to just make friends with our enemies without getting anything in return. We just did a piece this morning at the Foreign Desk with a tall list of demands that the Palestinians now have from Biden, basically to overturn all of the Trump policies that were favorable to Israel. Well, what are we getting in return if we are going to overturn these Israel policies? Well, with Israel, we have a reciprocity. What do we have with the Palestinians? We cut their aid because they were basically paying for terrorism, paid to slay. They're paying suicide bombers' families for them to go out and kill people. So, same thing. We got a tall list of demands from the Iranian regime. This is what they want when Biden comes into power. So our enemies are definitely sensing that there will be a weaker leader at the White House. And to Malik Obama's tweet, well, ISIS will probably sense the same thing.
Iran has unveiled a new ship over the weekend, Lisa, and it's loaded with all sorts of weapons, including multiple launch rocket system or MLRS. How concerned should we be here in North America with this ship?
Well, we should be concerned because we might have a president going into the White House who might want to make best friends again with the mullahs in Iran who are flexing their muscles, as you just indicated. Look, the pressure campaign under the Trump administration has been working. I hear this from the Iranian people, meaning they are willing to bear the difficulties of sanctions of a pressure campaign by the United States if they believe, and they do believe, that it will lead them to perhaps regime change or at least to have a better upper hand against their government. What President Obama did and what seems like what a potential President Biden would do is to loosen those reins and to allow the regime to continue with its human rights abuses, to continue funding terrorism in the region, in Yemen, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Iraq, the list goes on, to continue starving its people and putting that money towards its terror endeavors, and to get the bags of cash from the United States in order to fund this activity. Look, the Obama era foreign policy vis-a-vis Iran was horrific. It was horrific. It set us back and put us in a much more dangerous place. President Trump came in right away and fulfilled his campaign promise of withdrawing from the Iran nuclear deal and put us in a place where we could put pressure on the Iran regime in order to see some changes. And now, who knows what we're going to see in the White House. But if Biden does anything similar to what his boss Obama did, we're not in a good position to fight the Iranian regime.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has a message for presumptive President-elect Joe Biden. Don't go back to the 2015 nuclear deal with Iran, Lisa.
Yeah, I mean, look, President Bibi Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, has the most to be fearful of because he is right there next to Iran. Remember, the Iranian regime has called its enemies the big Satan and the little Satan, meaning the United States and Israel. So Israel is within arm's reach of Iran, and if they wanted to retaliate, they would probably take it out on Israel. So Bibi Netanyahu is asking Biden to think prudently for the region, for the stability and security of the region, to not enter in a nuclear deal, because that nuclear deal, all it did was, it was a meaningless piece of paper that gave the Iranian regime some clout. It gave them breathing room. It gave them a sense of normalcy with the international community rather than pressure them to make changes to their behavior.
The U.S. officially pulled out of another arms control pact with Russia. This marks the end of a 6-month notification process informing Moscow. Now, the Trump administration withdrew from the Open Skies Treaty, which was originally signed back in 1992. Explain the reason behind it originally.
Yeah, if you remember, we talked about this 6 months ago about why the United States would even give Russia the heads up. When we did sign it, it was one of the only pacts that we had with Russia to prevent any future world wars. It basically put a pact between the two nations, and now, as of this moment, we are pactless with Russia. This puts the, again, presumptive Biden administration in a very I should say, sensitive position to decide how they want to move forward with Russia and any meaningless pacts. The reason why the United States withdrew from this was because they thought that Russia wasn't keeping up with their end of the pact, and so they withdrew, and they gave them, as you said, the warning 6 months ago.
Azerbaijan forces have begun retaking territory held for nearly 30 years by the Armenian-backed government as part of a Russian-brokered peace deal. But Lisa, how long will this peace deal actually last?
Yeah, we've had a few tries at this and it hasn't lasted. Look, both sides feel that they are entitled to their position, and the fight is more than just the land. It's their pride, it's their nationalism. Both sides really taking this to the next level. We see a lot of the protests here in Los Angeles, where there is a very large Armenian community, expat community, and they have taken to the streets. They have taken to the embassies here to really fight for their nation. There's been a lot of bloodshed, and there probably will continue to be more bloodshed now that Azerbaijan is forcefully taking the land back. According to the peace deal, that's what was supposed to happen. But the Armenians were burning their homes, basically not wanting to give the land back, at least in the shape that it's in, and really being spiteful and upset, devastated by this decision. I do not think that this is going to last much longer, and unfortunately, there will be no true resolution in sight, as both sides feel like they have a claim to the land.
Chinese officials are furious as a top U.S. military intelligence general makes a visit to Taiwan. Lisa, under China's one country, two systems protocol, any official trip to Taiwan by a foreign power must ask permission from Beijing first.
And I wonder why we sent someone there, really get under China's skin, right? Yes, so the US has decided to draw a pact with Taiwan. They are a country that needs the help, and the United States says, hey, we'll help you. And the pact is in the areas of health and security and technology, some, water technologies and such. And there's a long list of things that the United States can potentially help them with. And of course, we have heard the upset that China is experiencing right now and thinking that they are being betrayed by the United States, that has involved itself with Taiwan, and so the saga continues between the two world powers.
New reports reveal that state-sponsored hackers from China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea are attempting to steal coronavirus vaccine information in what security experts describe as an intellectual property war. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, no surprise here. These are the same list of perpetrators who have always tried to steal intellectual property, whether it's in apps or technology or devices or drones or weaponry. So it's no surprise that they want to be on top fraudulently or fairly when it comes to the COVID vaccine. So the nations that you listed are, actively trying to hack these companies that have any sort of information, any sort of progress with regards to the vaccine. I mean, they don't care if they copy and come out first, or if where are we going to try them? So they've gotten away with it for many years, and they'll continue to do so.
How much of a lockdown are you experiencing right now in Southern California during this pandemic?
Yeah, we're shutting down again. As of Wednesday, there will be no outdoor eating again. As you know, here in Southern California, we have decent weather, even though it's our, fall, winter. We have very nice weather, and we can eat out almost the whole year. Many restaurants have spent thousands upon thousands of dollars creating an outdoor space with heaters and nice decor for patrons to be able to dine outside during this time, so that they don't have to shut down completely or lose such a huge portion of their revenue. And now the governor has decided, as of Wednesday, he will shut down all outdoor eating in order to slow down this second wave. Now, remember, this is the same governor who was caught a week or so ago at a very fancy restaurant up in Northern California, dining with none other than health officials from the state of California. Um, it's awful. Both left, right, and center are calling out the governor. They're very upset at this hypocrisy. They're very upset at the businesses, the small businesses, the mom and pop shops, the restaurants, all the different people who are being devastated by these shutdowns. And of course, there is a pandemic, but we have to really weigh out the losses here, the depression, the bankruptcy, the families that are being torn apart. And it's really, really horrific for someone to sit on his high horse and be such a hypocrite about, not understand or not empathize with his constituents in a large, large state like the state of California, that is a country in and of itself. So we're shutting down. The numbers are definitely rising, but my sister is a resident at a hospital in Riverside, California, and I think they experience probably one of the largest, number of patients and beds with COVID patients. And she says there is a rise, but it's about 70 or 80 people at the hospital at a time with COVID.
Lisa, we only have about 30 seconds left here. As we head into a very holy holiday, comes word that the Palestinian Health Authority has recommended strict limits on Christmas celebrations in Bethlehem this year due to the coronavirus.
Yeah, so this is obviously very upsetting for many who have the custom of making this trip every year, or at least walking in those steps every year. The Palestinian Health Administration has decided that it is too dangerous to have more than 50 people even convened for the Christmas tree lighting this year. So it will be a very, very different Christmas, just as it will be a very different Thanksgiving for us here in the United States this week. We've been told not to convene for more, I think it's 10 people, don't quote me on that, but no one's getting together because of that, and because of the fear of getting together and all that. So just cancel 2020 altogether. Christmas, Thanksgiving, Hanukkah, all of it. So it's upsetting. It is upsetting for many.
Well, we live in some very challenging times. Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftar, joining me once again from Los Angeles. Thank you, Lisa.
My pleasure.
The idea of introducing a wealth tax in Canada for the richest individuals in our country has been gaining steam recently, and it seems a lot of Canadians like this concept. But is it actually a good idea? Today's guest is Philip Cross. He is the former Chief Economic Analyst for Stats Canada and a senior fellow with the Fraser Institute. He's the author of a new report called Does Canada Need a Wealth Tax? And you can find that at fraserinstitute.org. Philip, thank you so much for being with us today. He joins us via Skype from Ottawa.
Thanks for having me. My pleasure.
Now, Philip, can you first of all explain exactly what a wealth tax is, how it works, and who it would apply to?
Sure. A wealth tax isn't that esoteric an idea. It works a lot like a property tax, and I think most people know how a property tax works. The city comes along, it evaluates your property to be worth a certain amount of money, and then it's taxed at a rate of 2 or 3%. The only difference between a property tax and a wealth tax is a wealth tax should deduct out your liabilities. So, for example, instead of just taxing the value of your home, it would be the net value of your value less your mortgage. So, but a wealth tax basically works along the same principles.
But it would apply to certain individuals making a certain income, right?
It most likely would. I mean, I think the idea is to shift the tax burden to wealthier people. So that also makes it different from a property tax. Almost all property owners pay a property tax, but a wealth tax, at least the way it's being proposed in the United States by people such as Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, and up here by the NDP in Canada, it's meant to be targeted people earning, say $400,000 or more.
I see. Okay, so why are so many Canadians in favor of a wealth tax? Is it because the idea that a large gap in wealth inequality is a bad thing?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure. I haven't seen, when I was doing the research for this paper, I didn't see any evidence of, X percent of Canadians were in favor of a wealth tax. I did notice that the NDP, who are the one party that advocated, didn't do very well in the last election. So, and similarly, we saw that Sanders and Warren in the United States lost the Democratic nomination, of course, to Joe Biden. So, those people who have proposed the wealth tax actually haven't done well with the electorate. So I'm not sure how widespread the idea is, but you can sort of see the idea, the appeal of the idea is that, in a time when we're running such massive government deficits, of course, we're starting to look for who's going to pay for this. And the reflexive idea is always, well, let's just pass this burden on to a small number of wealthy people or a small number of corporations, and we, the vast majority of ordinary Canadians, will not bear the burden. And of course, it doesn't work out that way in real life. We know that when we hit the fiscal wall in the mid-90s, for example, it was the average Canadian who bore the brunt of tax increases. Quebec, for example, is very well known for its social democratic leanings. And yet when they faced a deficit coming out of the 08-09 recession, they increased 4 taxes that affected the ordinary person. The sales tax went up 2 percentage points, the health care premium went up, tuition fees went up, and the tax on gasoline went up. So that's typically when governments need large quantities of money, frankly, they have to tax wide swaths of the population. The idea that we can get a small group of people to bear a large amount of the fiscal burden never works out. But initially, as I say, it's always people's reflexive solution when they're faced with a big fiscal challenge.
Okay, so how much of a wealth gap is there in Canada, and is it currently growing or is it shrinking?
Well, the wealth gap in Canada is much less marked than in the United States. The same is also true of income. And of course, wealth is really just, in some sense, income built up over time. You can have a high income for 1 year and not be very wealthy. But if you have a high income for several years, eventually you'll break into the top X percent. What's interesting is Statistics Canada just started collecting wealth data after the 08-09 recession, when interest in wealth became much more widespread. And I was there at the time when we started this wealth survey. And what it shows is that over the last decade, the concentration of wealth amongst the richest Canadians has actually declined. So we're actually going in the opposite direction for the US. But as I say, I often find that we import a lot of these narratives directly from the US without correcting them for the facts on the ground here in Canada. And I think the idea of a wealth tax is another good example of that.
What are some of the cons of a wealth tax? I understand that it might be quite complicated and costly to administer.
It's costly to administer. It doesn't raise a lot of money. We have a lot of experience with European countries, and they haven't been able to raise a lot of money. The net revenues are further reduced by it's very complicated to administer. And it really doesn't do much to change inequality either. So it hasn't proven, even if you're worried about inequality, and as I say, it's been falling in Canada, but even then, if you thought inequality was something that needs to be corrected, a wealth tax is probably not the way to go. It has proven to be not a very effective tool.
Now, Philip, you write that a wealth tax would constrain economic growth. Can you explain why that is?
Yeah, well, basically the idea is that a wealth tax would encourage consumption. It actually penalizes savings. If I had recently signed a big contract with the Vancouver Canucks, for example, for a couple $1 million, if I go out and spend all that money on travel around the world and whining and dining with my friends, that's okay. But if I save that money and reinvest it in a corporation, that would be penalized. So a wealth tax actually penalizes the very behavior that we know is best for an economy in the long term, which is saving and investment. And it rewards people who engage in frivolous consumption. So we really get all our economic incentives backwards with a wealth tax. So I think in the simplest terms, that's why it isn't good for economic growth in the long term. It's like low interest rates. It rewards people going into debt and penalizes people who save. And we know in the long run, that's the exact opposite of the incentives we want to.
That's very interesting. Yeah, it's an interesting way to look at that for sure. What can we learn from other nations who have implemented wealth taxes over the years?
Well, we do have a large number of European nations whose experience we can draw on. Starting in the mid-1980s, 14 European nations introduced a wealth tax of various forms and various severity. It's very instructive that 10 of them have given up. They just found it. In the case of Germany, the courts ruled it unconstitutional. In the case of France, they found that wealthy people were leaving the country. So they, in Denmark, found it was just too complicated to administer. So I think it's very instructive that most European countries gave up on trying to implement it. And those who have retained it have maintained very low tax rates. They define a very narrow base to which it's applied. It seems to be, frankly, largely token that they're keeping it even on the books. It doesn't raise significant revenues, less than 1% of GDP. It doesn't do much to change inequality. So it seems to be sort of like our carbon tax here in Canada. We slap a $20 carbon tax. We say, yippee, we've done something for the environment. And then we just jump in our cars and drive off to work as usual. It smacks of tokenism.
Mm-hmm. Now, Philip, is there any evidence that a wealth tax will actually cause wealthy individuals to move their business interests to other countries?
Yes, France in particular is very instructive in that regard. The French, when they abandoned their wealth tax, that was the number one reason they did it, was they found people were moving to other countries. The best example is Gerard Depardieu. I might be mispronouncing that, but the most famous actor in France, he very famously, in response to a wealth tax, just moved across the border to Belgium. So he was the most high-profile case. But we've seen this in other countries. There's a lot of evidence in the US, for example, that if you slap an estate tax, which is a tax on wealth of people when they die, that people will move from states that have a wealth tax or an estate tax to states that don't have one, and almost nobody moves back in the other direction. So there seems to be a lot of evidence that actually that people vote with their feet and they do move to avoid a wealth tax.
Mm-hmm. Now, how do business people typically view a wealth tax? Does it remove incentive to earn more income?
In the long run, yes, but it's much more of a concern that it removes the incentive to save and invest, and partly as a result. And most people, by the way, don't want. Everybody holds various forms of wealth. Most Canadians hold wealth, but it's usually in the form of housing and pension savings. So the first thing that most politicians do is they say, well, of course, housing and pension savings are going to be exempt. Well, when you do that, 70% of wealth is exempt, and you end up applying a wealth tax to a very small number of assets, such as small businesses or investment funds and so on. So it tends not to, in practice, to not affect very many assets, and that's part of the problem. It ends up not being a very large tax and rather inconsequential in its effect.
Now, can this affect average Canadians in the fact of, like, let's say a business wants to create fewer jobs because of, trying to avoid the wealth tax, right? Could this impact average Canadian workers?
Oh, it certainly could. In particular, I'd be quite concerned about its rate of a business formation. We're coming through a very severe crisis now. We know the number of businesses going bankrupt is rising and likely to rise quite sharply this fall and winter. We're going to need young people, especially, to come along and found new businesses to take the place. And new businesses in particular, they'll have a lot of debt when they're starting out. So unless you allow for that and correct for that, you can end up creating a lot of liquidity problems for new startups. They're suddenly going to be faced with a new tax on their assets. And for a lot of new firms starting out, this can, really stop them from growing. So, especially at this moment of history, when we want to encourage businesses to continue and new firms to start up, a wealth tax actually sends the exact opposite signal to investors.
Interesting. Now, are there some pros to a wealth tax? There have been a number of billionaires who say they actually support higher taxes for the extreme rich.
Yeah. Well, and yes, and I think those people should feel free. I mean, Warren Buffett is the most obvious example. He's spoken about how he should pay more taxes. I never understood, why doesn't Warren Buffett just write a check to the government of the United States and any other millionaires, billionaires out there who feel they have too much money, and if they can't find my address, then they can, send their money to the government of Canada. I'm sure they'll be happy to cash a check. The problem is that the fact that, certain individuals, a lot of the heirs of the Disney family, for example, signed this petition. Well, if you feel guilty about the money you inherited and you don't feel that you've earned it, as I say, feel free to send money to the government, but you are not free to impose those same views on other people who don't share them. And this comes back down to, a fundamental matter of liberty and freedom in our society. The other thing is, as an economist, I would say it's much more efficient to tax the income, the capital income that wealth generates. We want to encourage people to invest. Let people invest. Then when they make money on their capital gains or they pay out dividends, tax those forms of income. That's a much more efficient way. That's not going to deter the original investments in wealth creation, and yet it will lay a tax on that capital income. So there are, economists would argue, there are much more efficient and ways of taxing capital income without the distorting effects on savings and investment that come from a wealth tax.
Now, Philip, with the younger generation increasingly demanding some kind of a wealth tax for the rich in order to close that wealth gap, would you care to venture a guess as to whether or not we will see a wealth tax in Canada within the next decade or two?
I'd be surprised. I mean, I think to do so, we would have to close our eyes to all the evidence that's been coming from Europe and other countries that this just hasn't proved to be a very good solution. There are other ways of, if you are worried about inequality, and as I say, in Canada, inequality is declining, and yet we continue to import this narrative from the US that inequality is increasing. But even if we do believe in this false narrative, there are more effective ways of dealing with it. As I say, there are ways of taxing income, and especially capital income, that don't have any of the really negative consequences of a wealth tax that have made it such an ineffective tool. So, I really think, I hope that wiser heads will prevail and will learn from the experience of other countries and will adopt better, more effective ways of dealing with these problems.
And with that, Philip, it looks like we are about out of time. So thanks so much, Philip, for being here with us today. Philip Cross, author of a new report, Does Canada Need a Wealth Tax? That is available at FraserInstitute.org. Thanks so much, Philip.
Thank you. My pleasure.
I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at BCN. Thanks for watching.